the fastest member in his universe, and that will be Dyspo. Now, imagine a cosmic anomaly here, as I butcher that, completely where the power is reset, as we say. The Pride Troopers, the top warriors of their universe, they're reduced more or less to absolute zero in regards to their special abilities. They have no energy barriers, they have no ki, they're not able to fly, there's no supernatural power-ups, nothing. We strip away everything, all the flashy auras. We look on who strictly survives raw alien biology, their physical frames, and their natural instincts to see who comes out on top. So physically, Dyspo's biology is heavily inspired, obviously, by a hairless cat or a rabbit, whichever you prefer, meaning his entire frame is built for pure, unadulterated speed, okay? Even without his quote-unquote light bullet technique, right, his species naturally possesses incredibly long, powerful leg muscles that are designed for explosive leaping and sprinting. His body is lean, he's lightweight, and he's engineered for maximum agility, and furthermore, he has massive ears that grant him the hyper-acute natural hearing, allowing him to detect footsteps or movements from mile away, which gives him an advantage in battle that I think, if you're not keying into something about the attributes of an opposing character, especially one that could, resemble a rabbit or even a cat, you have to remember the hearing is very essential. You wouldn't want to make too much noise, right? So in a combat scenario without ki, I think Dyspo's strategy relies heavily and entirely on hit and run tactics, okay? He can't really stand toe-to-toe with a heavyweight, per se, like his teammate Jiren, so he must use his superior reflexes and agility in order to circle his opponents. And without power, Dyspo's win condition shifts to exhaustion, okay? He uses his speed to stay entirely out of reach. He's going to be baiting with attacks, and then he's making the enemy swing at empty air. That is more or less what he wants, and if you can visualize that, that speed advantage is what's going to allow him to deliver, very crucial and impact blows to pressure points. He can deliver quick stinging jabs, he can hit sensitive areas, he can hit the eyes or the throat, anything of an opposing enemy that's actually going to be a liability for them. And then, of course, after all that is said and done, he can retreat back into the distance, back somewhere, and then hit and run again. He's so fast, he can make that happen quite consistently if his opponent is caught off guard. So in this survival scenario, if it takes place, let's say, on a vast hazardous planet, okay, where the air is a little bit hard to breathe, you'll see that Dyspo's lightweight biology will still give him an incredible advantage because he's going to burn fewer calories just by moving. His acute hearing is going to ensure that he's never really ambushed, and he can easily outrun any environmental hazards like rock slides, predators, or even spots of the planet that, again, may have less oxygen, whatever he needs in order to fight efficiently, because, again, when you're moving that fast, your body also needs a lot of oxygen. If you want to learn more about that, just watch a couple documentaries on cheetahs. It actually explain it a lot. And for any cat, that's actually pretty quick. So, I think outrunning his environment is the number one thing he must do, and if he can topple that with hit and run tactics, he becomes pretty dangerous. And for him, I would say survival is really the most elusive game of cat and mouse, and his goal is to never get caught. He can hit and run, he can dip back into the shadows, he can outrun hazardous survival, or I should say hazardous environmental issues that could danger and threaten his survival in a long-term battle. Tapion's baseline training is completely different. In the Daizenshu 6 movie guide, Tapion is explicitly defined as a legendary warrior here, okay? Legendary warrior. Not a normal warrior, not legendary, okay? That's something that most people don't know if you're not obviously reading the Daizenshu. And he's also labeled as a master swordsman. Okay, those are two things. Nothing necessarily has to insinuate that he has some insane special power, unique ability. He's just a master swordsman. That's his trade, and he's considered a legendary warrior also as a result. So why does this matter? Because swordplay, again, it's a physical, mechanical skill. Even if you strip away Tapion's ki, his muscle memory, his stance, his footwork, his blade accuracy, these all remain entirely intact. And I tell this to people as I coach and do things for sports, that sometimes, even if you're not at the base level or at your prime or at the peak of where you want to be, having the muscle memory, having your fundamentals intact, and being able to really refine those even as you are evolving or getting into a groove, that is an understatement, and it's something that deserves even more attention. We see the depth of the physical training in the movie Wrath of the Dragon, which it's one of the movies I always watch back because it's so niche in a way out of that collection of about a dozen or so movies that came out during that time, and it's something special about it. Talk about that in another video. But even when Tapion is completely exhausted in that movie and he's like mentally drained, right, from suppressing Hirudegan, his reflexes incredibly sharp, okay, because he doesn't have to rely on those flashy energy blasts that we'll see from most of the characters throughout that movie, and he's really just purely relying on his precision with his sword. You take away his power, a punch from Raccoon becomes useless from the Ginyu Force, right? But a sharp steel blade in the hands of a master of someone like Tapion, that is completely lethal. He can hunt, he can defend himself, he can clear terrain without needing a single drop of ki. He can make himself faster, he can make himself even more precise. And then if we talk about why this really matters at the core of what makes it work, it's Tapion's mental fortitude. You see, the Ginyu Force, they're really the most pampered athletes in the entire Ginyu Force, or Frieza's Force, I should say, who are going to cry out for whatever they feel like is an injustice, and we saw that during their entire demise one by one during the Planet Namek saga, right? We see Raccoon in chapter 280, I think, of the manga. We see Tapion as someone who's obviously completely opposite of everything that the Ginyu Force represents. Because also according to the Wrath of Dragon lore, Tapion spent about 1,000 years inside that music box, sealed off, we know that, completely isolated in the dark, carrying the burden of a cosmic demon inside his own body. I don't know what that's like. I don't know if you guys know what that's like, so we'll just go ahead and leave it there. But if you do, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. I'd be interested to see what experience you've had. That requires an unbelievable amount of psychological endurance if you're actually going through that. In a survival situation, the mindset is everything. Your power is only so much if your brain works like at the level of a peanut or at the level of a squirrel, right? You need to make sure you're actually still thinking sharply, making right decisions. While the Ginyu Force would obviously panic, okay, when their scouters and their ki vanish and their tools and, their toys disappear, Tapion, he's a hardened lone survivor and a warrior. He is completely used to isolation. He's used to scarcity. He's used to not having a lot or having anything at all except his weapon. And he's still able to maintain absolute discipline under extreme stress. I think the introduction of his character was a bit overlooked, and people just thought that, oh, okay, this is cool. The flute, you have Kid Trunks and the sword. You have a lot of little things going on in that entire Wrath of the Dragon movie and that timeline, canon or non-canon. And the point is that Tapion was brought in as a warrior that had not been seen in Dragon Ball in a long time, with such absolute discipline and with a story that was different than most because his timeline exceeded the traditional timeline we were used to in Dragon Ball and in Dragon Ball Z. Tapion's timeline, again, in isolation for 1,000 years. Guys, we don't even live past 100 years, okay, or 200, 130 if you're talking about maybe some of the oldest people in the world in history. Tapion was an isolated, okay, I have to reinforce that word, isolated in extreme stress, under extreme stress, having to maintain discipline, okay. That's the one catch that I think goes over people's heads. When we think about the flute, I think it's useful, and I think it's more important than you may think about initially, because it's a mystical, magical melody that's obviously used to suppress the villain, the dragon Hirudegan, right? But if we strictly define no power, if we take that out of the equation as losing magical properties, losing the ability to have that type of special thing, the flute just becomes a regular instrument, right? It's just a regular flute if there's nothing mystical or magical about it. Here's the thing though, even without power, Hirudegan wouldn't be able to escape or exist Tapion even without the flute. Tapion loses magical defenses, okay, but he still gains the upper advantage of being a master swordsman with ultimate discipline. That is still going to see him through because he's going to have the ability to improvise and to adapt. That is what the best warriors of time have always had the ability to do across anything. They've had the ability to adapt and improvise better than the others. So when you stack all these things side by side, you look at the Ginyu Force, you look at Tapion, and you actually really compare the two. Who is most likely to survive without any gimmicks, any quirks? I think it kind of makes sense. And for the record, I love both. Like I said, there's no bias or preference for me. But again, the Ginyu Force served a purpose, and I think they executed that very well. But if there was ever a time where they were to return and you take away any of their special quirks, they are useless. Like Pan, any of the little kids of the Saiyans, from Goku or Vegeta's fam, any one of them would have the power to literally eviscerate any of the Ginyu Force members without question. They surely do now, regardless, but it's like it would really be uncomfortable. So when you look at it that way, the Ginyu Force, they serve a purpose, but they are not the type of soldiers, they're not the type of warriors that have the mental ability to really adapt to long-scale conflict. Tapion survived isolation for 1,000 years. That means he technically has the mental ability, the fortitude, to fight you for as long as more centuries than I can count. So just think about it in that way. Thanks for joining.